I'd like to thank you all for staying with us to the last panel. And I'd like to thank the organizers of this wonderful conference. And I hope that we can continue our conversation about this very important topic in the future as well. Well, in the interest of time, I'd like to take out my remarks and so that we can have few more minutes actually for the speakers and for question and answer session afterwards. So our first panelist, and we have three fantastic papers on this panel. The first one is by Dr. Ayse Kadayifci, The Future of Interreligious Dialogue in the US. Let me introduce Dr. Kadayifci just briefly to you. And if you would like to get further idea and information about Dr. Kadayifci, please look at your conference program booklet. Dr. Kadayifci is currently visiting assistant professor at Georgetown University's MA program in conflict resolution. She has also worked at the United States Institute of Peace on projects related to Iraq. She is also one of the founding members and the associate director of Salam Institute for Peace and Justice. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Kadayifci to the podium.
Assalamu alaikum, and I'm really honored to be here speaking with all these distinguished speakers today. As our moderator mentioned, my background is in peace and conflict resolution. And when I first came to the United States in 1997, I started working on peace in Islam, and my dissertation looked at Islamic interpretations of war and peace in West Bank and Gaza. And when I came to the United States, I started working at the world's first and still probably the only Islamic peace chair that is at American University. And since the day I came to the United States, I've been very much interested in dialogue, peace, and conflict resolution between Muslims and non-Muslims, and intra-Muslim dialogue itself as well. But when I first came here, there was not many interfaith dialogues, except in certain academic circles. And what I will share with you today is that my perceptions and my understanding of how the future of interfaith or interreligious dialogue in the United States could go forward. And also I would like to inform you that my comments reflect my own experiences, and it's definitely not exhaustive of the interfaith dialogue experiences in the United States. And I had the opportunity and chance to participate and conduct in various intra-Muslim and interfaith dialogues within the United States and outside of the United States. And in the field of conflict resolution, we take stereotyping, prejudice very seriously. And as history proved, stereotyping and prejudice can lead to discrimination, often leads to discrimination, and can even lead to ethnic cleansing and genocide, as we've seen in Germany and ex-Yugoslavia. So Islamophobia, like anti-Semitism, is an acute form of stereotyping and prejudice that really needs to be addressed from the perspective of conflict resolution field. But until 2001, there was not much interfaith dialogue initiatives started by the Muslims in the United States, although there were some academic circles, as I mentioned before, like the Rochester community, Muslim community. But after 9/11, it became painfully clear that Muslims that have been living more or less in isolated communities needed to go out and explain about Islam and the Muslims in general. If you look at the statistics at the time, majority of the Americans had no idea or very little idea about what Islam was. And those who had some idea had a very wrong idea about Islam. And of course, 9/11, events of 9/11 contributed to the negative image of Islam within the United States. So Muslims and non-Muslims started dialogue programs, but there was initially a lot of resistance in the Muslim community, and some of this resistance came from a misunderstanding of what dialogue is. And many believed, for example, we did the research at the time, why some of these communities in the United States, Muslim communities, were not willing to participate in dialogue. And these included having the idea that dialogue is about being converted or undermining Islamic faith, converted away from Islam, or being undermined in their faith. So there was this resistance to that. Others thought that interfaith dialogue was about creating one religion. Others thought it was an opportunity to convert others to Islam. Again, others thought that what's the point of just coming together and just talking? There's nothing we can do to change the structures of the system that undermines Muslims. The others also thought, some also thought of interfaith dialogue was not allowed in Islam based on misreading of some of the verses in the Quran. So we have done a research, and Dr. Shafiq from Rochester University and my colleague, Dr. Abu Nimer, wrote a guidance, Muslim guidelines for interfaith dialogue that tried to answer each of these criticisms towards dialogue from an Islamic perspective as a first step. And we also started working with a lot of communities in the United States, how to encourage more dialogue. First thing that we have done is to clarify what we mean by interfaith dialogue. One of the first things that in our field we focus on is dialogue is not just any conversation, and there's no winning and losing. In dialogue, you come with the intention of trying to understand another as the way they understand themselves. Rather than changing the other, you come with an opening to be changed yourself. So this was one of the first things that we've done. But I'm not going to go into the successes or failures of interfaith dialogue in the United States. I just want to say that there has been a lot of different formats of dialogue within the United States involving Muslims and non-Muslims. These include high-level meetings, such as the Common Word Initiative, conferences, but it's also included open houses, also being more active in the community. Like I see more Muslim women being engaged in my daughter's parent-teacher association, for example. We also had more Muslim documentary makers or filmmakers coming out of doing documentaries, movies about Islam, trying to mainstream Islam. But we still have a long way to go, in my opinion. We have started the first contact. We have started successfully completed the first stage of interfaith dialogue. But I want to just very quickly, for the sake of time, identify some areas that we could work to improve more. And these are not to say that we have done nothing in these areas, but we could do much more. So I have identified 10 basic areas that we could improve our approach to interfaith dialogue. When we look at the interfaith dialogues in the United States, we see that we have focused a lot on educating non-Muslims about Islam, which was very important for us to clarify misunderstandings of Islam. If you look at the statistics, almost half of the Americans believe that Islam is a religion that supports violence. But I don't think we have done enough to invite non-Muslims to our circles to hear how they understand their own faiths. There has been a lot of initiatives in the Muslim world to explain what Islam is, but most of my experiences is that Muslims think they know what Christianity is, what Judaism is, but they're not really curious to learn how a Christian understands what Christianity is for them. So I think there should be a more of openness to learn about other faiths as well. Second thing I would like to emphasize is that majority of the interfaith dialogues include Christians followed by Jews, but there has not been enough dialogue, in my opinion, including other faiths, such as Buddhists, Hindus, even atheists, Baha'is. And I think it's really important for Muslims to reach out to other communities that are living in the United States. The third point that I would like to emphasize is that we have focused a lot on issues related to Muslims. For example, if there's an injustice done against Muslims, we've been very vocal, which was very important to us. But I think we should show more sensitivity to injustices done to other communities within the United States and in the world, develop a more coherent Islamic principled justice narrative, which is rooted in the Quran. Quran is very clear in so many ways, in so many different verses that says, don't let the hatred of others swerve you away from justice. Or in another verse, it says, even if it's against yourself, your kin, pursue justice because that's next to piety. I think we should develop a more systematic, universal understanding of justice. And when an issue is not only involving Muslims, we should be equally defending their civil rights. And I have observed that although among Muslims we talk about injustices done by Muslims towards other Muslims, and at times injustices done by Muslims towards non-Muslims, we have been less vocal outside of our own communities to talk about these. Understandably, there has been a lot of defensiveness about this issue, but I think it's really important as a principle to talk about these issues more vocally. And I know there's been some concern and some more sort of voices coming out regarding what's happening in the Middle East right now. But this is, we have been very shy in criticizing some Muslim rulers for the injustices that has been done. Or in our own communities, we're shy to talk about some of our own problems within ourselves. The other thing that we have done pretty well is to encourage and talk about similarities between our faith and other faiths, as if being different is a problem. We have always emphasized, oh, we're all the same, we believe in the same things. Although this is a very important first step in dialogue, it is also important to see difference as a cause for celebration and not shy away from differences and understand how we differ from other traditions, but not to see that as a negative thing or not to see the differences of others as a negative thing. And I think we also need to become more mainstream. For example, a couple of years ago, for my daughter's school, they asked me, we're introducing different faith traditions. So we would like you to come. My daughter was 4 years old. Excuse me. We're introducing different faith traditions. So we're asking moms to read different stories from faiths. So we have had a Jewish tradition, so some mom came and talked about Hanukkah, etc. And if you could read us a story about Islamic tradition, we'd be very happy. I actually remember calling Ali Bey because I was trying to find one nice story that did not include converting another person or war in children's stories. I looked at the bookstores, there was nothing about children's stories, for example. I looked at internet, all the stories about children included how the goodness of Muslims led to the conversion of another, or talked about a orphan whose father had been killed in a war. So I remember calling Ali Bey frantically, we have to do something about this. This cannot be the only children's stories that I can find in this country. And so we have to be more part of the narrative, not in a defensive way. The other thing that I think is very important is to also talk about educate our own community about the principles of dialogue and conflict resolution from within Islamic tradition. And this could be by including these verses or these principles in Islam to include in our khutbahs, in our community centers, and in our education programs. And another really important thing that we need to address is the intra-Muslim dialogue. Because in my experience, when you have an interfaith dialogue, the differences between Muslims become very clear. And we have, if you look at the Muslim community in the United States, 65% of the Muslims in the United States comes from 80 different countries with different sects, with different ethnicities, languages. And we hardly agree on some of the, we all think our understanding of the Islam is the true Islam. And there's so much misunderstanding among ourselves, so much conflict within ourselves, and it's very important in an interfaith dialogue to come by establishing differences within our own communities and finding ways to develop a strategy how to address that. And the other thing that's very important is that we cannot just only limit our interfaith dialogues to talks and conferences and writing about it. We have to go out there and engage in projects that includes Muslims and non-Muslims to do joint projects on issues of common concern. Finally, I would like to add that there are increasingly more women involved in interfaith and intrafaith dialogue, but I don't think there's enough women at the high decision-making levels within the Muslim community. I think it's really important to create even more space. I know there has been much being done in this area, but it's really important to include women in fiqh councils more and to have them more at higher level meetings, as well as different levels of interfaith dialogue and community in our own communities. I will just end here. I don't want to talk too much for the sake of respect for my guests' time, my co-speakers' time. I just want to emphasize that interfaith dialogue is a very important component of living in a peaceful society, getting to understand each other, and we have done a lot, but it's definitely not enough. We still have a long way to go, and these are some of the areas that I thought would be very important to improve upon. Thank you.